Hey Computer, play About Bees podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the About Bees Culture and Curiosity podcast with Ron and
Bidzina Mosiashvili.
Bidzina. What are we doing today?
Today we're going to be talking about moving bees.
And why would we want to move bees?
Well, there's various reasons. Most common reason is crop, getting to the right crop or honey field, wherever the flowers are blooming.
Right.
Or the source of nectar, wherever the source of nectar is.
Yeah, so describe really briefly what it would mean to move bees to a new source of food.
Right, so flowers bloom in different periods of the year, and they have nectar sources that come out in different periods. So let's say you're in one area in May, you might suck up all the nectar. The bees might get all the nectar in that area, but if you transport them to another area, depending on how far you want to go, there could be another flower source that has more nectar that you could suck up.
Well, that's for sure. We actually talked a little bit about that on an earlier podcast with what the people in Egypt used to do on the Nile River, where they would load the bees on barges and start in the south, closer to the equator, and then work their way north, closer to the Mediterranean, as the different kinds of flowers bloomed because seasons went by. Another thing that a lot of beekeepers I have seen move their bees for not just the different seasons, but different locations that have a different concentration of plants or flowers. In Florida, I used to keep bees for a few years in Florida, not really year-round, but enough to know that the citrus would bloom in February or March, and you could make, in a really good year, 60 or 80 pounds of honey from a hive of bees from the orange blossoms and the citrus trees when they're blooming. And as soon as they were done blooming, usually there was almost nothing for the bees to do because the places where the oranges were blooming, as soon as the oranges were done, there was nothing else. It was a monoculture area.
Right.
So what do? You load up your bees, you take the honey off, and then you load up your bees. And a lot of beekeepers would haul their bees north to Minnesota or
where it starts to get more warmer.
That's right. And then they could do a whole different kind of crop.
Right.
But there were a lot of Florida beekeepers who never left the state of Florida with their bees. There were some. And instead what they did is they would go from the orange bloom and haul their bees to the Florida-Georgia border, still inside of Florida usually. And there was something called gallberry and saw palmetto. And that's a little tiny palm tree. Well, it's not a tiny thing. It's more like a big bush, but it's a palm. It has palm
compared
claws.
to a traditional palm tree.
That's right, compared to a traditional palm tree. So it's like these little mini. Boy, it'd be easy to climb those. Anyhow, they would make honey off of the gallberry, which is kind of like a bush that grew. A lot of times it grew as an underbrush around places where people grew trees, like pine trees, for pulp or for paper milling. So they would have that. And then when that was over, they could haul their bees to the coast, usually, either the east or the west coast of Florida and a little bit further south. And then they could usually harvest something called mangrove, which was a tree that grows in the salt water. And it's kind of like a scraggly bush tree kind of thing. And it would make a few pounds of honey, and then you'd move your bees, take the honey off, move the bees again a little further south. There were areas that were full of a eucalyptus tree that locals called punk wood or punk tree. Also, it's called melaleuca.
Okay.
So the melaleuca, and those are both accidental imports from Australia. And then once that was done, that would be wintertime. And there's also Brazilian pepper bush, which I think came out of Brazil. Wow. And that was like a holly, like a big bush that grew in the same area as the melaleuca. And then when that was done, your bees would have a rest for 2 or 3 months, and then orange blossom
It seems like it's similar process as shepherds when they're moving their
Yeah.
herd of cows or sheep to different grazing land. Would it be the same?
That's a very good analogy, that we would shepherd our bees to new pastures.
Right.
And yes,
Except with vehicles.
right.
You could
No,
carry it on your back,
You
but you can't.
could. And
It'd be cool if you could teach them to fly one from one home to another.
that would be really cool. But I think they wouldn't go, like maybe they would go 6 kilometers or so.
Right,
You
so
know?
yeah.
So you want them to go a little further than that
Yeah.
in order to get into a different area with different pasture. But that is pretty cool. Put them on your back and carry them. I think that's actually literally been done.
Yes.
And
yes.
also, in the country of Turkey, where you briefly lived,
Yeah.
there are a lot of beekeepers, like thousands of beekeepers, and some of them keep their bees along the coast. And for generations, going way back to the days before anybody had vehicles, they would put hives of bees strapped to the donkey,
Right.
and they would lead their animals up the sides of the hills, so they'd make honey close to the coast in the spring, and then as it got drier and hotter, they would move up into the hills to get a second crop of honey.
Right. There is a really rich beekeeping history in that area, especially alongside of the Black Sea coast. And it's called Trepi zone.
So the Black Sea coast, where I'm just trying
The
to
Turkey
picture.
Black Sea coast.
Okay, so Turkey faces the Mediterranean, right?
Turkey is the southwest of Turkey
Mm-hmm.
is borders with Greece, which is in the
In the
Mediterranean.
Mediterranean,
But
okay.
the entire south of the country, almost the entire south, is bordered with the Black Sea,
Oh, okay.
and the north. I'm sorry. The north is bordered with the Black Sea.
Right. All
The
right.
north
Now I
is,
got it.
Yeah, I messed that up.
Yep. So,
So-
there's the big, huge city of Constantinople,
Yes. Well, modern day Istanbul.
Istanbul,
Yeah.
and as you go through Istanbul, it's a port, and it's at a what I guess you would call a strait,
Yes.
Strait, a strait that boats can pass through, and that's how you get into the Black Sea.
That's how you get into the
Okay,
Black Sea.
I got
yeah.
it pictured now. So those Turkish beekeepers then would probably start on the Black Sea and then move the bees south and up into the mountains. Because if they moved them north, they'd be out in the ocean, in the Black Sea.
Right. Yeah. So they would start south,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm not exactly sure where they're moving them, but the area that I'm talking about, it's more closer to borders with Georgia, specifically. So it's it's more in the north.
Okay.
I haven't actually looked at the South
Right.
Turkey beekeeping.
Right.
More of the beekeeping histories in the north.
Oh, okay.
Because there's a huge so on the other side of the Black Sea you have Ukraine, which we all know is
Yes.
like
Yeah,
1 in every 100 Ukrainian is a beekeeper.
that's right.
And Russia is a very big beekeeping history. So
Yes.
that entire that Black Sea coast is it's subtropical actually.
No way. Is it?
Yeah, the coast of Georgia where it's
Mhm.
with the Black Sea on that is subtropical.
Wow.
And there's limes, tea, and oranges, and
They can raise
mandarins.
tea trees and
Yep.
citrus
Yep.
in the country of Georgia.
Yes, on the west coast.
Every time we talk, I learn something new about Georgia because, I in my mind had just pictured it as this recluse, mountainous country. And I didn't really even know that it bordered on a big open sea, the Black Sea, and that there were places where it was subtropical.
Yeah, that's right. It's beginning to sound more like Georgia in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
As
The USA, Georgia, not the country of Georgia where
Yeah.
you're from.
well, Atlanta, Georgia is known for its peaches.
Mm-hmm.
So is Georgia.
Oh,
We had everyone. It's very common to have a peach orchard in your backyard. We had one in
Oh,
my
wow.
still do.
that's fantastic.
So it's peach is
Mhm.
very common.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds really like a pretty interesting country. It would be nice to go there sometime. Do tourists ever go visiting Georgia?
Yeah, it's a very touristy place now. But there's the beekeeping is that area where Georgia is bordered with Turkey.
Yeah.
On the Black Sea coast by Batumi. That's where a lot of beekeeping takes place, I think, in Turkey.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is a very touristy country. But yeah, just kind of
And do you know of people moving bees inside of Georgia?
are moving inside and
Yeah,
they
moving their hives.
Yeah, they probably do something like that
Yeah.
because I guess we could talk about that a little bit. Going back, way back like 600-700 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
there are people called the Laz people of Georgia. They still exist in Georgia, but a bunch of them lived in that area where it's modern day Turkey, which bordered the Black Sea coast.
And Laz is short for beekeeper,
No, it's a group of people in Georgia
who kept bees.
Well, they kept bees in that area in Turkey because they had to.
They had to sneak across the border to do that.
No. They were captured by the Sultan.
Oh.
The Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, and it was ransom. They had to give him gold, but they had no money. But there were a bunch of community members that were beekeepers, so they became the royal Sultan beekeeper, and they provided the entire royal family with precious honey every
Really?
single year, and that was
Really
their
cool. That's really neat.
homage. And so, still to this day, those people live in the area and are doing the beekeeping the same way, and they put hives on their back, and they will climb up a tree, and there's a guy actually, he's 70 years old doing this.
Wow, I can't imagine any 70-year-old being that crisp and viral and tough.
I have videos of it if you'd like to see.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's So this guy, he's with his son. He's showing him how to do it. His son's 25 years old, and he's worried sick of his father going up this tree. And he's like, no, you watch me do it, and then you worry about it. But...
So why would he want to put bees up a tree when he could put them on the ground?
To protect it from bears. So they live in an area where bears are common.
Yes, but the bears won't climb a tree?
They put it very high up in the tree.
Okay.
And they can't kill the bears. They're protected.
Mm-hmm. Oh, like the music. It's so we're watching a map now. Now I can get a picture of where the Black Sea is. And they've made Turkey look like honeycomb. This is quite. Those of you who are listening to the podcast, you want to jump over to our video channel at some point if you have time to put your feet up and watch, because there's some stunning pictures of the area. This is all inside of Turkey and not Georgia. Then, okay. So now we're looking at a forested area in a valley.
Here, let me skip to him doing the beekeeping.
And what else are we going to see here? Oh, there's a gentleman.
Yeah.
Oh, he looks like he's about my age. Yeah. So we've got this very old, decrepit gentleman who is on the ground pounding something with a hammer.
Here, let me find where he's doing beekeeping.
Okay, you find where he's doing the actual beekeeping part of climbing up the tree.
Here we go.
You sure?
Yeah. So
More good music too. Oh wow! It's like
I'll turn
Sisyphus
the
with
audio
his rock that he has to carry up, and then
that's right.
This is his punishment for not having gone to school and becoming an engineer.
Well, I think he's like doing something else.
Something else, making videos. It looks like this is really great.
So that's his son, and then
Can you give me give us the website address?
it's on YouTube, but I will share the
Share the link, and we'll put that in our show notes, because I'd encourage people to take a gander at this. So we've got an elderly man who's in much better physical shape than I am, and he's got a huge round, looks like a bucket that sticks out. It looks like a turtle shell.
So that's an ancient way of beekeeping there, but yeah.
And they're moving up into the tree to establish a spot for the bees to set. And they have to do this because of the bears. And this is...
So he's actually setting a swarm trap.
Oh,
There's no bees inside the log or the
okay.
backpack he's carrying.
Oh, okay.
And apparently there's a bunch of bees in the area. There's more trees that he's made, and he's going to lure them in here.
All right.
Yeah.
So lure away. Well, this is not so different from the story that we had not too long ago about the Ukrainian beekeeper that was in the news for doing something similar on International Bee Day on May 20th. There was an article,
Right,
and we
we
talked about
mentioned
it.
him, yeah.
Yes. And he was also setting up traps in order to lure the bees in. Well, there's so many ways and so many different ways of keeping bees, and it's interesting to see what people do in different parts of the world. But we'll come back to North America for a little while. And this is an ancient picture from 1905. It was in the...
It is ancient now. Yeah.
yeah, yes. And what we're looking at now is a wagon with colonies of bees in it. And this is just your basic old-fashioned wagon. Actually, my grandfather had one almost identical to this, with the big round wheels and the spokes, wooden wheels with spokes sticking out to hold on to the rims. And just like my grandfather, this guy's using horses to move the wagon around. But he's got honeybee colonies on the wagon. He's sitting on top of the beehives with reins, the horse's reins, in his hands, and he's got two horses that are pulling the wagon. So he's moving bees. And this is the way people move colonies in the northeastern part of the United States, which is what it looks like because there's a barn in the background, and it just kind of makes me think that that's the area he's in. When people would want to move bees from a wintering location out to the apiaries at the start of the season and get the bees set up and keep them there for the summer, and then they would move them back to a good wintering location. So that would be their tendency to move the bees in those days. I also have one more picture of horses moving bees. And here we've got a couple of people standing on the wagon, and this, I think, was somewhere down in the south. Well, actually, it's in Kentucky because it has a subtitle on the photograph, and this one I know to be from 1917, and it says, "The Root Company's men ready to move bees to one of the outyards." So again, I think this is a situation where they wintered in a cellar or wintered in a huge backyard where they could feed the bees during the winter. They're in the state of Kentucky, which is sort of in the south, and they're moving the bees. Now, horses and bees do not get along very well. So we can always have a problem with the bees get bounced along in these hives, and some of them come out and they start flying around. You're not moving very fast, so you're not leaving a cloud of bees behind. The bees kind of catch up with the wagon and don't get totally lost. But while they're flying around to keep up with the wagon, they can smell the sweat of the horses.
Oh, really?
Oh, they don't like it.
Right. They do
And
not like sweat.
They don't like the sweat of horses, the smell of a horse.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of you people get off on smelling horses, but in general, bees don't, and they'll start to sting. So these gentlemen who are riding on the wagon, trying to control the horses and move the bees from the wintering location to the outyard for the summer, they have their hands full because they've got to get those colonies moved and keep the horses under control.
Yeah, that's interesting because donkeys, they're kind of considered, the word donkey can use as a derogatory term for someone, calling someone a donkey, right?
Oh, I thought there was a 3-letter word that meant donkey that people would use as a derogatory term.
That's right.
Okay, so, but you can also call them a donkey.
Yeah, but they're often better at transporting than horses.
Yeah, I think donkeys get a bad rap, don't they?
They do.
Like, why are we doing this to the donkey? For
I don't
one
know.
thing, we create them. Don't we? No, that's the mule. The mule is the one
Yeah,
I'm
mule,
thinking
yeah.
that was created. So they're kind of in the same category, though. You don't really make fun of people by calling them mules, because
No.
that would be very politically incorrect.
Yeah. And yeah, that's right. Donkeys have a very bad PR team. It's actually a good point that you bring up here. You know, there are some animals that have very good PR.
Yeah, honeybees.
Honeybees, that's right.
Bumblebees.
Bears.
Not among the beekeeping community.
But everybody thinks bears are cuddly, you know, Smokey the Bear, you know, Winnie the Pooh.
Okay.
Owls.
Yes,
So
owls.
owls is known to be this wise bird.
That
right?
actually on the side, they're these ferocious animals that will just shred a mouse.
It's very ferocious, and it's actually not very intelligent.
No?
There was a bird trainer lady that talks about training different species of birds, and she said owls were the hardest that she had to deal with. They were
so dumb.
Yes,
They were like
that's
dumb,
what
dumb as a donkey.
Well, but yeah, going back to the donkey. So the reasons why they're better than a horse is got to do with their instinct for self-preservation.
Oh.
So donkeys have a strong instinct for self-preservation. They're less likely to put themselves in danger, which is beneficial when navigating treacherous terrain or hazardous situations. So scenario, if a horse encounters a snake, a horse known for its flight response is likely to react with an alarm when it encounters a snake.
Oh, yeah. Then they rear up on their back legs, and
That's-
the rider gets thrown on the ground and gets bitten by that snake.
That's exactly what its instincts will tell it to flee. The horse will rear up, whine or snort, and bolt. Scenario 2, donkey encounters a snake. Donkey, known for its cautiousness and observant nature, is less likely to react. It will stop and assess. The donkey might stop and carefully observe the snake, trying to determine the level of threat. Bray. It might bray to alert others of potential danger. So that's donkey's bray. That's their neigh is horse. But slowly back away. If a snake appears threatening, the donkey might slowly and cautiously back away, maintaining a safe distance, and try to stomp on the snake. In some cases, a donkey might even try to stomp on the snake to neutralize the threat. So that's so odd, right? Like
Right.
They have, in some cases, the horse is probably way more capable to stomp out a snake.
But it isn't. She or he is going to just run, right?
Like physically capable, I mean. Like it's more physically capable,
Right, much
intimidating.
bigger animal.
Yeah,
Yep.
much bigger animal, but it seems to not use its brain too much.
I wonder if humans are jealous of the donkey because, you know, donkeys are these sturdy, hardworking, quiet, humble animals
they are.
that are able to stomp on the face of a rattlesnake, and we can't do that ourselves. We tend to be more horsey.
They get a
And-
bad rep.
Yeah, but then we gave them that bad rap. I mean, the horses didn't. It was humans who make fun of the poor donkey.
I mean, the donkey to force them, and they were probably trying to get them force them to do all sorts of dangerous stuff, and they don't want to do it. So that's why.
Oh, yeah, because horses are so dumb, you could just talk them into crossing a river or something.
Right,
where
exactly.
The donkey would say, I'm not going there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, we're going to move on a little bit, but not too much, a little further south. So we have been looking at a picture from the state of Kentucky that was posted in a book written by the AI Root Company, that were manufacturers of bee equipment in the United States, still are, and they still actually produce the Bee Culture Journal too. That's part of the Root family of products. But further south, about 1,000 miles, 1,500 kilometers or so, you'll reach Florida, northern Florida. And in northern Florida, people have, for generations, been keeping bees on boats and floating the hives up and down the Apalachicola River. So the Apalachicola, a river in North Florida, will flood. And when it floods, it will wipe out any apiary location you might have. So you want to keep your bees above the water, you put them on a boat. And also you can access locations that would have been impossible, especially 100 years ago when the photographs we're looking at now were taken. So we've got...
So this is like kind of the marshlands, or is it marshland?
Well, it is actually a river, but marsh all around it, and the trees' roots are flooded for, maybe a few months of the year, most years. So, and these are huge trees. They're tupelo trees that produce a really fine quality honey.
Wow.
Like really, and they inspired a really fine song by... oh no! Don't leave me now, brain. Van Morrison.
Van Morrison.
Yeah, and it's called Tupelo Honey.
You want to listen to? I wish we could.
We
get copyright strike for that.
we can't play it, but we'll invite everybody else out there in the world to go ahead and listen to Van Morrison. Here's another great one: Van Morrison and Tupelo Honey. So that song came out at least 30 years ago or so. And one of the recurring refrains in the song is, "She's as sweet as Tupelo honey." It's a great song, actually. It's really I do like.
That's the next. That's what I'm going to listen to on my way home today.
You should. Yeah. You should. It really is. So it's Van Morrison, Tupelo honey. These gentlemen in the pictures with the boats that we're looking at right now are trying to produce Tupelo honey along the rivers of North Florida.
So they're moving honey up the river just like the Egyptians, huh?
Sort of. They, I think, if I remember right, the Tupelo blooms sometime in probably April and May.
Oh, so they would do it different time periods.
Yes. Yeah.
But this is what the Egyptians were doing on the Nile, as you mentioned earlier.
That's exactly right. That the Egyptians used big barges. I'll bet their boats were bigger than what these beekeepers have. The beekeepers have a boat that probably can hold about 40 colonies of bees. So they would float it, park it, anchor it, leave it in place, and then just come back when the crop. What if you had a really big honey crop one year and you came back and the boat wasn't there because it sank? I'm sure they were prepared for that.
They might have calculated it, but
that would be so sad. Yeah.
That would be sad because then nobody likes watered down honey.
No, nobody likes watered down honey. Oh, okay. I don't know if I can go on from that. That would be watered down. So that was another way of moving bees. So we're talking about moving bees today on our podcast. Another way of moving bees that's more typical these days in North America and probably in most parts of Europe and other parts of the world are to load up bees on trucks and tie the truck. Yeah, you don't want to tie the truck down. Could you imagine if you had electric trucks, then you'd have to tie them down with enough extension cords to be able to reach your bee yard? Because they take a lot of power to move. Anyway, what we're looking at now is a photograph from 1958. It was a picture that my father took of his own bees, and he has a truck with nukes on. So these are little 4-frame nukes that he made up in the state of South Carolina in the United States from bees that he took to South Carolina in the wintertime, and then when spring arrived there, it always arrived about a month or two earlier than it would in Pennsylvania where he lived, so he could make nukes and haul the bees back up. And we're looking at, this would have been an enormous job. He hand-loaded probably, I'm just going to guess, I haven't never really counted this, 1, 2, 3, 4 times 3 is 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 100. He might have 200 nukes on his truck and trailer.
Wow.
And they're all roped down. There are no nets anywhere. This was in the days when you couldn't find or buy a beekeeper's net like they use today. Instead, what he's got to do is make these little screens to cover the entrance of each hive.
Wow.
So the bees couldn't escape while he was driving.
That's right. And these are 5-frame nukes?
I think he used 3 or 4-frame nukes. I can't remember, but I think that they were 4 frames.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they are just to make up for winter losses because he would still winter the majority of his colonies of bees. And
at the time, probably
Pennsylvania.
At the time, probably a roll of window screen is going to cost you
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, it wouldn't be flexible enough and it would tear and rip.
Right.
So, what they make these days are nets that are fluorescent, so they glow and people can see them when you're driving. And they are very bee proof. They're reasonably lightweight, and they're made out of plastic type of material that it's really hard to wreck them, tear them, or rip them. So, they can cover up the colonies of bees and keep everybody inside. But in those days, he had to do this by, first of all, closing the entrances of the hives and putting screens so they could still get oxygen and still not get overheated. I think the heat was more important than, as a problem than the air, because bees don't really use a lot of air while they're inside the hive, and they don't. It's hard to suffocate bees in a colony. They can be covered for the winter in snow here for 3 months, and not have much airflow coming under that bank of snow, and yet they survive well. The other thing I want to mention just really quickly here, that since it was in the 50s that he was doing this, it was before President Eisenhower commissioned the interstate highway system in the United States.
Wow.
And that made a huge difference for beekeepers, because they no longer had to go through every little town on their trip on 2-lane roads and all these red lights, and stop and go and stop and wind around, get behind other vehicles that are going slowly. It took so long to, you probably were going about 30 miles in an hour, even though your top speed would often be 50 or 60, but you've got all these towns, and you've got, narrow roads passing other vehicles. It just took a long time. Now, it is so much easier for us to pull onto the interstate and just floor it.
It's a marvelous system.
Oh, it's brilliant. The
Americans
did such a fabulous job with their highways. It really is. It was.
Actually, when I was growing up, I would look at it and I'm like, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why we only have one in Canada?
Yeah.
We only have one road.
Well, we're physically a larger country than the United States is, and we have, I think, they have 8 times the population now, 8 or 9 times as many people as we do, and it just, we can't afford it. So we just.
Well, they always keep saying that. They spend so much money on so much stuff, and I don't know.
You're right. I guess we have to also acknowledge priorities and the demand of the people.
Right.
So, but we tend to do, our cities are so far apart that we tend to fly between the cities instead of drive between them.
Well, we should at least have a high-speed rail.
We should.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe one day we will.
Yeah.
Here's a picture. Next picture is this big blue truck with a framed-in screen. Actually, my oldest brother built the screening and owned this truck and trailer, and then sold it to me when he moved on to owning a semi-tractor and trailer for moving his bees. And he asked if I wanted to buy it from him, and of course I did. So I used that. I was still moving the bees by hand, and what we're looking at in this particular photograph is I'm in a pasture field, a cow pasture field, and around the edges of it are citrus trees, orange trees. So I'm just getting ready to pick up and move colonies off to the north. So this was a load-out yard in Florida. So hand moved again, picking them up. Even in Canada, when I had to move colonies of bees from one apiary to another, it was all hand lifting. So here, one of my brothers is on the back of the truck, and I'm lifting up the colonies from the ground, lifting them up the bed of the truck. So it was a 2-ton truck, and so it's a pretty large truck with 6 wheels, and lifting the hives up off the ground to a height that, I don't know, the deck on the truck was probably up to about my chest, so I'd say about 4 feet off the ground. So I had to lift the colonies, and these are double-story colonies, so they could be pretty heavy at times.
Yeah.
And then on top of there, then my helper was loading the bees on top of each other so that they would be double-story tall, and we would pick up the bees and then take off down the road, and usually the travels wouldn't be that far, so it'd be pretty close. But that's really hard work, really tough on the back, and pretty exhausting. So a lot of beekeepers, this would be about 40 years ago or so, a lot of beekeepers went to using some kind of a lift, an automatic lift. So I have a photograph now of a couple of beekeepers who are moving colonies of bees by hand, one hive at a time, but they're using what was known as a Cali boom. And Cali, hey, earlier, I've got to correct something. Earlier, I mentioned that AI Root Company was in Kentucky. It was actually Cali that I'm mentioning right now. Cali Company was in Kentucky. AI Root was in the state of Ohio.
Okay.
So southern Ohio, but still, I'm off by about 100 miles there, and I just wanted to make that correction. So these people are using a Cali boom in northern Florida, picking up the colonies of bees. And the Cali boom is an arm, a big, long mechanical device that's run by an electric battery, and it has the power with all the little gears and everything to lift up a colony of bees and lift it off the ground and park it on the back of a flatbed truck. And it's called the Cali boom because it was made by the Cali Bee Supply Company, which was in Clarkson, Kentucky, as opposed to the AI Root Company, which I think was in Dayton, Ohio.
I don't know if the details matter.
Oh, but they do matter,
Right.
because if a beekeeper's listening to this and they go, ha ha, he doesn't know where AI Root Company is. He said Kentucky. They will.
They do like to be a little bit of a stickler.
Well, they should too. They're trying to keep us honest. And if we get that wrong, then maybe everything else we say is wrong. So if I do make a mistake that I recognize, I'm certainly going to take a moment to try to fix it. Then we move along from using lifts and booms and the Armstrong method, which was lifting by hand, into the more modern system. And here I had my colonies of bees being moved professionally on the back of a rented truck. I bought a huge net to cover the bees, so pick them up with a forklift, load them up. That's me with the checkered jacket and the jeans on the right. I'm standing there beside a big semi-tractor truck, and it's being loaded by one of my friends who has the forklift, and the driver is standing there watching the bees get loaded. He's the guy that's also in the photograph towards the left. So I kind of went through...
That was probably nice, huh, once you got that bobcat?
That made a huge difference. I only had one spill with the bobcat, and I was moving. At one point, I had 1,200 colonies of bees in Florida that I was operating for a friend of mine, and it was his forklift then to move those bees around. And one time, he had an apiary that was down a ditch and up the ditch and into the forest we went, and I got tangled up in a root with my lift as I was trying to lift colonies of bees, and it snapped, and the bees kind of popped up in the air a bit, and they fell off of the pellet. But
and yeah, you got the wheel one, so those ones are really when you put the forks up, you get really wobbly.
You can, You got to be really careful about what you're doing with those. But they've been around for quite a few years. And the whole pallet bee system was developed in California by a family called the MDs, EMDEs, the last name. And I knew the scions, the founders, the start-up people of that particular beekeeping family, because Earl MD was keeping bees in northern Saskatchewan as a retirement hobby into his 50s and 60s and 70s. And that's where I met him. And he at one time was running about 5,000 colonies of bees and moving them around, like from Florida to the Dakotas, but originally he was in California. And just to expedite everything, and he was a real smart, very smart guy, was to put all the bees on pallets. And he was, as far as we know, he was the first one back in the probably mid-50s or so to come up with the idea of pelletized bee colonies and moving them like that.
Moving them, or also like prior to that, were beekeepers using pallets to just place them in yards?
No.
Or was pallets were like, because they were kind of expensive, pallets?
I think people really hadn't thought of it, or they weren't that common, and there were, often the commercial beekeepers would put down a couple of cement blocks on the ground,
Yeah.
and then put like some
Cinder blocks?
yes, cinder blocks, and put maybe some 2x8s or something on top of the blocks, and then the colonies on that, so that would get them up off the ground.
Right.
But the pellets weren't. I didn't know of too many people who were using pellets back in the old days.
Yeah.
But they did come along in the 60s, and they were fairly common.
Yes.
And so that kind of went all the way from moving bees with horses and wagons and boats, and going through hand lifting and using various machineries, and then finally the forklifts, which I think is the most common way of moving big bunches of colonies of bees today. But you have your own. Bidzina, I want to hear your story about moving bees. So
Yes.
you are moving some bees. I have another picture up now. So what are we looking at?
So just a little background behind where I moved the bees. So I was in Foremost, Alberta. That's 3 hours from Calgary. That's where my bees started. I moved them to Vernon, which is about 10-hour drive from Foremost to Vernon, British Columbia.
Okay.
Then the following year, I was back in Calgary, so I moved them. This picture, I'm moving them from Vernon, BC to Strathmore, Alberta. And what I'm doing here, that's my friend that helped me with the transport. We're at nighttime, I'm filling up some gas, and my back is filled up with a bunch of boxes, all the equipment that I had. And in the front there, it was about a 12-foot trailer. I had in the front there just empty boxes of frames. And then in the back, it's about 15 beehives.
Wow.
Or actually, it was 18 it was 15 beehives or 15 beehives. And
Do you have any trouble along the way? Like, that's a long drive with the colonies of bees on an open trailer.
it wasn't too much trouble. I took a window screen, aluminum window screen, and I cut it up into pieces, and I stapled it to their entrances so they weren't able to get out.
Okay.
And not too much trouble. And as you can see in the where I have the frames there, so they're going with the road.
Mm-hmm.
So I had them set up
Parallel
to
the direction you're driving.
to the direction I'm driving. So that's so the frames can go with the traffic of the flow of the traffic instead of.
So every time you almost hit somebody and you smashed on the brakes,
Yeah.
then the frames wouldn't bump into each other and squish the bees.
Yes, and I should note this was my first time ever driving a 12-foot trailer.
Okay. Well, you survived it.
Yes, I did. I am here, but
It looks like it's dark in this photograph.
it is nighttime. Yep, we were transporting them at night, and yes, I left. It was maybe 10 p.m., 11 p.m. and when I left, and I got to Calgary in 6, 7 a.m. in the morning.
Okay.
Yeah, could have been later, but I was driving all night.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't sleep. I mean, that's kind of
Yeah.
unsafe, but the roads that we were on, it's fairly lit, and it's common to be driven on by semis.
Yes.
And so it wasn't, it's not like I was on a barren road, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't want to do it at daytime.
With the bees.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
then you risk killing them.
Yeah.
But I'm inexperienced.
They're
anyways.
always going to get out at some
Right.
point and fly away, and so that is a problem. But it looks like you moved them from central British Columbia, well, south central. So
Yeah.
you were in the mountains, in a valley,
Yeah, valley, yeah.
and the town was called Vernon.
Specifically, I was in Enderby or
Okay.
Grid Rod, BC.
Yeah, I don't know if I know. I know
There's
Enderby.
a big beekeeper guy there, the Robertson family.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he has a pretty big operation there. They have a blueberry farm, Baqueta Ridge Blueberry Winery.
Mm-hmm. How did he feel about you moving in a bunch of your bees on him?
I worked for him. I was picking blueberries for him.
Okay.
But
But you didn't tell him you had bees.
He knew I had bees.
Okay.
It was actually so funny. It was I met him. I met him through someone else in town,
Mm-hmm.
and then I found out that he's actually contracted to mow the lawn where my bees are.
Oh, okay. Then you found out that you had bees. He sounds like a nice guy.
No, he was a very nice guy. I worked for him on his blueberry farm, paid me
Yeah.
very well,
Nice.
helped me out with my beekeeping. Yeah.
Fantastic. The world is small. You don't want to mistreat people, even if they are Bidzina moving in with his bees from the wealthy province of Alberta and kind of muscling in on his territory.
He definitely didn't. I don't know if he felt threatened, but he didn't.
He didn't.
There was no sense of that. Like they were
No.
very wealthy.
Yeah.
Like you should see his winery.
Oh, I would love to.
Yeah.
I'll have to
or
make a
blueberry
point of that.
winery, Baqueta Ridge. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have pictures. I guess I could show you. Real
No,
quick. Yeah,
that's
it's okay.
Let's go
Let's
on.
move on.
But I do want to know then that you arrived back at maybe 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning.
It was 6 a.m. It was daytime now. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
because
then
I drove pretty slow.
yeah, that's good. And you went out to the town of Strathmore, which is less than an hour to the east of Calgary.
Yes.
And
there, yeah.
and you unloaded the same morning then?
I unloaded the same morning. Yes.
Good.
Yep.
Yeah, you don't want to mess that up. But you drove safely, and that's important because, unfortunately, every year there are a dozen or more huge wrecks with people who have lost their colonies of bees because somebody fell asleep while driving or, just the inevitable accidents that happen to everybody.
Bunch of kangaroos crossed the street.
This was in Australia, so it
Yeah.
could have been a bunch of kangaroos. We're looking at a photograph now, a very, very unfortunate situation where the driver died.
Yeah, sorry, I
And-
shouldn't laugh, but it was just there was a videos of a bunch of kangaroos. They apparently just run on the highways, and then there's semis. They specifically put bumpers on them to just plow through them.
Oh, it's kind of like the old-fashioned trains that would have what we call the cow catcher in the front.
It's wild. There's videos of it. They're just plowing through kangaroo
Well,
because they're kind of an invasive species. But
no,
that's
they're
why.
not in Australia. They're native and natural to Australia. It's the semi-trucks that are the invasive species.
Well, I heard that they cause a lot of trouble.
They probably do,
Yeah.
but only recently because the humans are there.
Right. Sorry, they're not an invasive species.
No.
They're native to Australia.
They're a nice guy.
Yeah, the semis
kangaroos.
are the native.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember somebody saying that they just were so keen on going to Australia. They had to go to Australia to see the kangaroos in the wild.
I love kangaroos.
I like them too.
Yeah.
I do. They're very intriguing, big
They are.
rats with these huge tails.
Yeah, and then the baby comes out tiny and then jumps up in a little pouch.
Are weird, yeah,
Yeah,
marsupial,
yeah, what-
marsupial living.
What
yeah.
the hell?
Well, they might think the way we do it is also what the hell. So I've heard this happen to different people going to Australia with the once in a lifetime desire to see a few kangaroos in the wild, and they'd be driving somewhere and look over there, way out there in the field, a kangaroo. And they drive a few minutes. Oh, hey, there are a few more close to the road. Drive a little bit more kangaroos, and they go on and on like this. And pretty soon, it's another bloody kangaroo. Get off the road.
Yes.
So
They're like camels, I guess, kind of like camels of the.
oh yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, but we have deer in Alberta. That's what we have the issue with.
Yeah, we do. And I hit a deer years ago.
Yeah, it's
and
wild.
yeah, it's pretty sad. And anyhow, this poor driver lost his life and lost the bees. I don't know if it was the beekeeper driving. Sometimes it is. Sometimes they rent and hire people to move the bees for them. the bees get pretty much mangled up. I've only once witnessed a bad bee wreck like this, and it was at a time when I was in Florida, riding somewhere with my oldest brother. We might have been going out to look at some of my oldest brother's beehives, and on our way back, we were on a fairly large road. It was a divided highway with 2 lanes on each side, but it wasn't a restricted access. It wasn't like an expressway. It was like you could get on and off anywhere, anytime you wanted to. And as we're heading one direction, we looked over on the other side of the road, and there was a bee truck in the ditch.
Oh.
And colonies of bees all over the place.
You and your brother saw this.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
So we were among the first to get there, and we went to work picking up the combs and putting them back in whatever boxes were still, in any kind of decent shape.
What a better person to be there.
In that part of Florida, probably every third truck driver was a beekeeper. Wow. So we had more beekeepers stopped too to also help. I mean, beekeepers are as thick as kangaroos in that part of Florida. So at least they were when I was a kid.
Thick as kangaroo tail?
Yeah, I think it's the tail of a kangaroo. There were a lot of beekeepers in that part of Florida when I was a kid, and we did help this company. It was at that time, the world's largest beekeeping business. It was Powers, Jim Powers, Powers, just like Powers. So Jim Powers wasn't there. He was probably in some other part of North America, and his bees were being moved. And I don't know if it was the beekeeper driving but somehow it ended up in the ditch. And we did have kind of 3 or 4 hours of picking up pieces.
Yeah.
And once it seemed like it was pretty much under control, then we, left them.
So it could be recovered, can be recovered.
Some of it, not everything.
Not everything,
but some of it was. So we talked about, so that's one of the really big downsides of moving these bees.
Yeah.
We haven't even mentioned another big downside of moving bees, and that deals with biodiversity. And, we are picking up and moving, in the case of Australia and in the cases of North America, we are moving what could be considered an invasive species. At least it's a species of insect that is not native to North America, and we're moving them all over the place. We're picking them up in big loads and hauling them and setting them down somewhere else. And we have to recognize we can be somewhat disruptive of the natural order of things when we're doing this. And
and it's also pretty, I would imagine it's hard on the bees a little bit. I mean, if it's done right.
Right. If it's done if it's done correctly,
just like another animal.
Yes. Yeah. Right. If you're moving your sheep by truck, which sometimes they do these days to move them from pasture to pasture, then if it's a long trip, the sheep have to have enough water. They have to be kept quiet.
Right.
And, and if you do it wrong, then you can cause a lot of trouble for them.
Yes.
But typically, I think typically what I saw was you could move a colony of bees from the north where they haven't been working for a couple of months and load them up in the back of a truck and haul them into a place like Florida. And by the time you've unloaded them off the back of the truck and you turn around and check the colonies that are sitting on the ground, they're bringing in pollen.
Mm. All right, so they're already getting to work.
They've worked it out so quickly. It's amazing.
I would also imagine that they can sense when they're taken to a location where there's source now. Let's say they've come.
Well, it's the temperature, I think, is what they really noticed, because in most cases, when beekeepers move their colonies out of a northern area, they wait until the colonies get really quiet. The brood rearing has cut way back, and the bees are starting to experience a bit of winter. Mm. So it might be November. And then they pick them up and move them to somewhere really warm. So the bees have been in temperatures that are well below freezing, maybe for a few weeks. And then they hit these temperatures that in Fahrenheit would easily be 70 and, in Celsius would be 20. So they are noticing the change in temperature, flying out to investigate, and whoa, there's some flowers over there.
But let's say you're you're in Calgary and you have a bee yard, and then you decide to move it to another bee yard that's a better location. Would they sense that? And it's the same week, it's the same time period.
Then it's quite a different issue, and that's a really good question or good point.
Why I say this is because when I moved my bees 2 months ago, they were really angry during transport. But then by the time we got, I guess maybe they calmed down. By the time we got to our location and I took the screen off, they came flying out. And they were still kind of angry, but within minutes they had calmed down. It's almost like, and it was a really good area, like compared to where we came from.
Right. I don't think they would actually have sensed that they've moved to a good area.
Oh, okay.
But there was probably something else going on. Maybe where you picked them up and moved them from, it wasn't the best area, and they were just kind of grumpy because of maybe anything from human traffic around the colonies to noises to just the fact that they weren't making that much honey.
Right.
And so they're grumpy, and you loaded them up, and then they were still grumpy when you opened them up.
Yeah.
But then the fresh air caught them.
They could smell the flora.
They might have.
Okay.
I really.
Right, but they don't.
I can't really answer that.
I don't know. I just thought
sure.
it was bizarre behavior. I'm like, wow, they right away. They just accustomed to it.
Yeah, and it might be that bizarre behavior had a reason, or it might be that a reason that we would understand and make sense out of, or it could be that bizarre behavior was just something that happened because of the conditions of moving the hives and picking them up
Maybe
and so on.
I had the AC turned on. Maybe that calmed them down.
That would.
Yeah.
That really would.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But let's. So this guy, tragic accident.
Yeah.
Passed away.
Yeah, that was pretty rough. And one last photograph. This is the last picture I've got to show and talk about today, and it's about moving bees inside of packages. And this photograph is actually from Patrick, who visited us a couple of weeks ago here on the podcast.
Right.
The Patrick who kept bees in the country of Cameroon in Africa, and presently is helping out with the initiative for the Catholic Relief or Catholic Immigrant Society, where they are training beekeepers. And he had some packages come in for teaching purposes to show people how to put in packages. So this photograph is his, but I like the picture. It's very descriptive of what we want to look at. And those bees now came from New Zealand, and then they were brought to Canada. So we're going about, 15,000 kilometers maybe.
Right.
And they have gone from a production season that was just ending in the fall, and then they're coming into a place where we're just starting up with the bees. Packages have been around for
they fly them here.
They fly them. Thank you for mentioning that, because we were talking about all these different ways of moving the bees, either with horses or boats or big trucks, and now we're talking about them actually being put into aircraft and flying. So the temperature has to be controlled, and they have to be loaded and hauled and unloaded. So the logistics are really incredible to get your timing down just right. So the beekeeper in New Zealand has the packages ready. You have the commitment from the freight company ready, and the planes are ready to roll with these packages, and they will move several thousand cages in one flight. And then they immigrate into Canada through Vancouver, and then they get redistributed from there or put on another plane to be sent even further to the east.
And this was we were having a really tough time. Beekeepers were having a tough time bringing bees in during COVID.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
There were no flights. They were all canceled. So it just happened that was not a very good year for wintering bees either. So a lot of beekeepers lost their hives over winter, were counting on replacement packages in the spring, and suddenly had to make do without having the colonies coming in.
Yeah. But yeah, it was wild.
Yeah. So I think we're going to end with this, but I don't know if you have any other kinds of things you want to chat about with the moving of the bees.
Yeah, so I remember reading an article maybe 3 years back. It was titled "The Greatest Bee Migration in History." I can't find the article anymore.
Well, tell us what you read.
In the article, they mentioned how over 1 million beehives from all across North America get delivered to California for its almond pollination.
Yeah.
But I did manage to find another article from thepacker.com, and they say 2 million beehives, so double than what I just said. I thought it was 1 million beehives.
I think it's quite a bit more than 1 million. I don't
Right.
know if it actually hit 2 million at any point, but it's in that range. It's like a
Right.
big number, a whole bunch of zeros after it.
Yeah, so something, let's say close to 2 million beehives imported to California for almond bloom. So California grows 1.5 million acres of almonds every spring, and all of that acreage must be pollinated. With almond blossoms being a rich source of food for honeybees, it's a natural symbiotic relationship.
Well, that's a little bit of a stretch. I don't think
Right.
that the almond blossoms are that great for the honeybees. They provide a little bit, but when you stock as many colonies as they do into a smallish area, then there isn't that much for them to forage on.
They're just trying to maximize pollination.
They're trying to maximize pollination
Right.
by overstocking the number of bees, which isn't the best thing for the bees.
No, well, the problem in California is that there aren't enough bees to pollinate such large number of almond trees. To help mitigate this problem, the state imported roughly 2.1 million beehives for the 2021 almond pollination. Assuming each hive contains roughly 20,000 worker bees, that comes out to 42 million bees.
Not more than that.
Yeah, really? I don't know. You think they get their math wrong?
They sure did.
Oh.
You said 2 million colonies?
2 million and 20,000 worker bees.
Yes. So 2 million times 20,000
That should
is
be in
going to
the
be about
billions.
40 billion or something
Yeah, what
like
the
that.
heck? Oh, I read it wrong.
Okay, fair enough. So it's
This
trillion.
comes out to
40 trillion bees.
42 billion bees.
You know, they could just leave it at the 2 million colonies of bees and not tell us that it's 40 billion bees because, I mean, those are numbers that, you know, what do you picture? You picture...
But it makes the mind go crazy.
It does, yeah. Yeah.
Hive imports will likely increase in 2020. And it's recommended to use 2 hives per acreage during pollination. So for California almond crop, 3 million beehives are recommended, said Johnston Lewis, Chief Scientific Officer at California Almond Board. Unfortunately, only about 500,000 bees hives exist in California. The rest must be imported. And you mentioned just now that it's not necessarily that symbiotic, especially when farmers just cram as many bees in an area, not necessarily for the bees, but just to trick the worker bees to pollinate because they're so desperate for food.
Well, they don't want to miss any of the blossoms that could produce nuts for them. And it's without any bees, the production is extremely small per acre. Like maybe 300 or 400 pounds. I don't know. I can't remember for sure if that's the right ballpark figures. But as soon as you put bees in, you can end up with maybe 2,000 pounds of nuts. If you have a maximum pollination, which takes a dense number of colonies of bees.
Yeah.
So when they put in, if they pay $250 per hive for pollination, and they put 2 colonies per acre, that's $500. But you've produced at least an extra 1,000 pounds or more of the raw nuts. And it takes the same amount of water, same amount of land. You know, you still have to drive the tractor up and down. So they need to make their big crop.
Yeah.
It's just the way we do things these days. We've got 8 billion people to feed, and I know I don't like it, but I'm not going to step off the planet just to make one less mouth to feed. We just have to figure out how to do this in a better ecologically managed way.
Yeah, a couple episodes back when we were talking about how honeybee populations worldwide have increased 85% or something like that.
Yes, they have over that. Yep.
That's right. Well, in the same period, the human population has increased 144%.
Oh, okay.
So it's definitely and you know people eat honey, yeah. So it's not it's definitely not
So
maintaining.
1.5 times as many people as when, like in 1960. I'll bet it's even more than that.
It was 13 colonies per 100 people. Now we're down to 10, or 13 colonies per 1,000 people. Now we're down to 10.
Okay, so the yes, yeah. So we did increase the number of colonies of bees, but the population is still outstripping the growth.
Yes.
Yes, and as long as we continue to do agriculture in the way that we are, we're going to continue to need those little spark plugs of bees out there helping with the pollination. I think we're going to wrap up at this moment.
Yeah.
It's time for us to go.
It is time for us to go.
Do you want to take us home?
Yeah, they are a spark plug, and they definitely spark me up. So, but they do. I honestly, I never thought they would, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Sparky.
yeah,
What do
yeah. Join us next week when we talk about something more interesting.
Hey, this is about as interesting as it gets for a beekeeper. But we do have something lined up for next week, and we're going to keep it a surprise until we let everybody know.
Yes.
We do hope that you're following us on our podcast. Make sure that you like and love our podcast, and please follow and subscribe.
Yes.
And also get on that YouTube channel.
Yep.
And make sure that you're keeping up with us, because it will encourage us to continue to do this.
Yes.
And we do appreciate everybody who's been listening.
We're on all the socials. We're on all the audio podcast platforms. And please check us out. Don't forget to subscribe.
Matt, thank you.